Welcome to Growth Colony, Australia's B2B podcast. I'm Alex from Xgrowth. Each episode, we bring you B2B founders, CMOs, marketing and sales leaders to find out what makes them successful and what was behind their failures, or as we like to call them, hard-learned lessons. If you enjoy the episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and share the pod with a friend you think could get value out of it. And of course, make sure to join the community Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack. That's enough from me though, let's dive right in.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm Shahin Hoda with Xgrowth, and today I'm talking to Micah Gabriels, CEO at Mooven, a company building software solutions for traffic management to reduce the impact of construction and road projects. Today, we're discussing how Mooven has transitioned from a word-of-mouth approach to a marketing-led growth plan, the challenges they've had faced along the way, and how they've addressed them, and what's next. On that note, let's dive in. Misha, thanks a lot for joining us.
Awesome. Great to be here.
No, absolute pleasure. I mean, I really love to unpack this. I mean, Mooven is you've gone through crazy growth. You've had some really awesome steps along the way, and now my understanding is that now you're looking at kind of breaking out of that word of mouth and creating a system for the growth of the company. Give us a little bit of a picture of what's happening at Mooven today on that front.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, it was one of the ones where I think it's always important that we do this. We step back and go like, how can we go forward on this? And often what gets us to the place we are now won't get us going forward. And so as we start to unbreak that, it's really fascinating because we're trying to really leverage that value of that inbound, which we've been getting, and recognizing, what that delivered to us and why, but then taking that and figuring out how we can put that and leverage that at scale. And I think that's a really interesting thing for us as we start to really enable the marketing channel for us now. We've picked up all this amazing learnings from getting these referrals coming in. And it's like, how do we turn that into something which is a movement, something which can drive real speed behind what we're doing at Mooven?
Got it. Okay. So let's talk about that. You talked about there's a lot of inbound demand that is coming through. What was happening? Paint us a little bit of a picture of what was happening in Mooven before you kind of start this initiative of really driving marketing within the organization. How did the whole sales and marketing and customer acquisition look like before that?
Yeah, cool. Perfect. So normal customer acquisition would be, we sign a deal with a customer. What happens is there's normally 2 or 3 other parties who end up getting access to Mooven software. They'll see it, they'll learn about it. One of them will ring us up, or maybe that customer talks to another person, they'll ring us up. So it was a really nice position because pretty much we were kept busy as a sales org from people ringing us up and saying, we want to talk to you about this kind of piece of work, or can you help us in this particular project? And then so what that meant is from the sales organization, we weren't really learning how to generate our own demand, and we weren't learning how to throttle that. So we had these guys who were bringing people on to take them through. We'd do this great job of obviously delivering to the customer, and that would drive us more work. I think one of the interesting things which we saw there is you then end up servicing the market who comes to you. And, if you're looking to scale really quickly and you're looking to grow really large, you've got to be quite clear about where your sandbox is and where your niche is. And so what that started to cause for us is we started picking up work which is a little bit broader from what we should actually be doing today. And so that's this really interesting tension of you sitting there going, wow, we can help these people. This is really cool. Like, it really fits with our ultimate mission, but it isn't the right thing for us to do right now. And so that's one of those interesting pieces which we found from the sales team. And, the other flip side of that is you have something happen and you don't have an established pipeline sitting behind there. So you're a little bit at risk. So all of a sudden, if those conversations don't keep coming into you, you don't know how to turn that tap on, and you don't know how to turn that tap on faster.
First of all, I think it's very interesting the way the business model works. I don't think a lot of businesses are lucky enough that there will be multiple parties that could be a customer involved in the conversations, and they would be fully exposed to the product, and then later on asking for it. I mean, that's awesome. But I also get the fact that you would then go through those feast or famine cycles, right? Of like multiple people are coming in and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then, oh shit, there's nobody talking to us. What are we going to do, guys? Got to hit some of those numbers. So what's happening now? I've heard of you talk about transitioning to a marketing-led growth plan. What is going on that front?
So there's probably three different objectives for us. So one, because we're really introducing marketing from a scratch in this business, is really the next 2 years for us is actually a learning phase. So if you step back from all of this, we go, what we want to do is figure out how do we get the message which resonates, how do we activate our audience, and how do we grow that marketing engine within Mooven, so that in 2 years' time, we can come and throw some real money at it and grow it. So I'm really active in all the work which we're doing right now is going, I deliberately want to do a couple of variants and I want to see what fails. Because if we don't test the bounds, we just won't be able to learn, right? So we might find something which is effective. And this is something I've always struggled with in the marketing space is, when you're doing nothing, doing something works. And you can pat yourself on the back and you're like, cool, but we're going great. But you don't know if it could be twice as good. So we want to be really deliberate in this phase about how do we understand what really works and what doesn't. Within that framework, we're looking at a near-term objective, which is we've got an expanding sales team. So we've rapidly expanded the number of salespeople we have. We want to feed them highly qualified leads, right? So we just want to do a good basic marketing job. So we're going, cool, let's just execute on that. Let's keep it tight, let's keep it focused, let's just drive some value to the business. But at the same time, we've set this really clear goal. So we're in this lucky and interesting position where we've got a market we're operating in who knows they need to change how they're working and knows how to articulate what's important to them, but is not sure how to approach it. So my kind of thesis with this is we've got this really strong position. If we can do it right, we're in 5 years' time, we can have a really strong owned earned media position where we've helped to articulate how they go about solving that problem. And our strength of brand is actually a major driver for the ability of the business to scale. So what we're doing is we're going, how do we do some tactical activity now? But how do we start to do that work, the really hard yards work, which takes years, and really challenge ourselves on how we're being unique and being relevant so that we can get to that position. And so it's this really interesting tension at the moment of diving a little bit deep on personas and strategy at the same time as just trying to be a little bit tactical and just going, how do we help boost revenue in the door?
Right. And when it comes to, you said you're all obviously doing a lot of work on the marketing side, but you're also working a lot in terms of building the sales team. Are you looking at a mix of sales team in terms of outbound and inbound, or is it right now the primary focus is on inbound?
So what we're focused on at the moment, as we've said, within Australia, we can hire people who are good at outbound. So, they're just hunters and they can go out, they've sold construction technology before and they can do that. So we're really building that team and they're doing an amazing job of starting to kick that off. But when we look at our market at scale, you go, actually across the developed world, we've got this reasonably homogenous problem. So the US, UK, New Zealand, Canada, we're all facing the same problem. You've got a really quite clearly definable audience and who's quite highly educated, who's got reasonably easy decision-making authority, but they're geographically siloed. So even in Sydney, if you look at Sydney or Melbourne, those teams are scattered all out across the cities. So, if we had a field sales team, it's going to take them ages just to drive around Melbourne or to drive around Sydney alone. So this is that really interesting piece for us to go, actually, as a sales team, let's just get those guys running. That can work for 2 years, 3 years for us. That's great. That builds some revenue. That funds our time and effort to build that real engine to drive the leads and new business into Mooven, which is marketing. So we go we need to have the time, we need to have the cash to really fund that. So let's do field sales, out you go, do that. At the same time, we're starting to transition and we're starting to look at how we drive marketing forward.
I love that because I feel like in a lot of organizations, that is, from a leadership perspective, that is not very clear for the leadership, right? And they would look at the marketing engine and they would be like, all right, so in 3 months' time, we're going to get something, right? And that's not how marketing works. Marketing, if you focus on brand, like you said, that could take 12 months, 18 months for it to really start to ramp up. Yes, in 2-3 years' time, it will definitely beat a lot of other angles of other go-to-market strategies, but it will take time. So I really love how you're balancing the two and doing short-term, having a strong focus on the field sales component while building the marketing engine as well.
It's one of the things which I find kind of most empowering is when you look at a go-to-market plan to scale, and we've spent quite a lot of time mulling on this, going, how do I break it down? And I've only got a small job to be done at each phase. So it's just what's sufficient at this stage? It doesn't need to be perfect. in time will change and we'll transition through different phases. But it's really, really nice to break that down. And then you start to look through this as well and you go, what's that role of customer success? What's the role of the product? So for us, that ability to share and have other customers come in, that's deliberate, like that's built into our product. So we're starting to look from a product perspective of going, how do we think about scarcity? How do we think about progress? How do we think about status and how we build our product? Now, if we can like slowly go through this evolution for our go-to-market, which all of these things are starting to revolve and turn on themselves, then you get to a really, really powerful engine, which is pretty hard to turn off. And sales is absolutely still part of that. And that's one of those interesting messages to the team. It's like, you guys are doing an amazing job doing it in this way. For the time being, we think we're going to transition away from this, but that doesn't make your job less relevant at all. We've got all these interesting aspects of where that goes to and how that evolves as well.
Got it. As you were going through this process, what was something that you've learned that was maybe initially you didn't think about, or you felt like it was like, oh, I didn't realize that's how it works, or I didn't realize I should think about it that way? Was there anything that was like a light bulb moment for you going through educating yourself and putting the plan together?
I think probably the biggest light bulb moment for me over the last 3 years from setting up Mooven and growing it was actually what sales can be and what sales should be. So it's quite easy to have a little bit of a negative view of sales, but my God, from doing quite a few years of it now myself, I've said this a few times recently, I wish you could go to university and do like a bachelor's or a master's in sales. Right. It's just crazy. We teach people about finance, we teach people about marketing, sales absolutely is an art, but man, there's a lot of skill there as well. There's a lot of methodology. There's a lot of things you can do. Having been in it for quite a while now, I'm looking at it and going, if you know how to break down this problem and you put the hours and the effort in, you're pretty much guaranteed the result. And the amazing thing is it's not a nasty result for your customer, right? You can sometimes get that perception. So if you're doing it right, you're genuinely understanding how you're solving a problem for them and you're understanding what it's worth and you're charging for that. And that's fine, right? And so I think that's the big lesson for me is, I guess the discipline and the knowledge which actually sits behind well-run sales has been really, really interesting. And it's, part of my role I never want to kind of fully let go of anymore because it's really fun and it's a great space to be in. And so that's something nice because it used to seem a little bit more transactional and a means to an end, which, it's a bit harsh, but that's kind of sometimes how it feels. So
I totally agree with you. And I think, I went through that process as well. I was like, this sales thing, this dark magic of convincing people, making them pay you money. And then once you go through that process, you're like, wow, there's like a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of things that you need to learn. And you're right, there's no proper educational process for it, even though it's one of the highest paying jobs out there. You got salespeople especially if you look at in the technology space, a senior account executive on $250,000 a year. And yet there's no kind of career or educational path towards that.
Yeah.
And it just blows your mind, right?
Yeah, totally.
So the other thing that I wanted to ask is we talked about some of the objectives that you want to achieve, right? In terms of that transition to a marketing-led growth plan. Are there any other objectives that you're looking at hitting that we didn't touch on?
Well, so funny enough, as a whole business, really my objective for the next 2 years is if I can get us to have a really strong culture where we're really clear on our purpose and we're really clear on our mission and we understand how we can tackle these things, we'll be set up for success for that next hurdle. So everything we're doing in this next 2 years, there's the outward facing stuff I need to do. So there's the things I need to do to be able to close out another investment round. There's the things I need to do to make investors happy. What I'm really looking at is how do I get this really strong unit of a team running with really strong alignment so that we can exit out of this 2-year space at just massive velocity. So we can take our team and make it 5 times as big at the end of that, and it's reasonably well run and structured and everyone kind of knows how to feed that in. I'm super, super happy. And so actually underlying everything I'm doing is that. So it's going how do we understand what's important? How do we understand how we go about it? It's how do we create a move and feel which is well beyond me, right? So I think sometimes the cliche which comes through and you get pushed on is they're expecting one of the founders to be quite involved, and that's the driving force within the business, which you clearly are. But I'd love this thing to live, without me. Now I've still got a big input on that, but how does that form? Like, how does that have its own identity, its own personality, and its own clarity and real hunger to drive and achieve what it needs to? If we can do that, I'm really confident that as a team, we'll be able to, cover off all the different hurdles you'll have as you start scaling. But that's the core objective.
Got it. Okay. Changing lanes a little bit. I also want to talk about some of the mistakes that you've kind of made as you're doing this transition, right? Some of the things that you did and you're like, oh, well, that doesn't work. Does anything come to mind?
Probably a few things. And it's hard, right? Because you kind of think you've got stuff set up in the right way. I think probably from my side, we've underinvested in our website and we've underinvested in that digital presence. So look, it's really easy when you have customers coming to you and ringing you up. It feels like everything's kind of rosy, and you see the ones who come to you, right? And they've gone through the filter and they're happy. What we're not seeing, and because we were so busy with that crowd who came through all the ways of looking at us, is all the other people. Now, you can't kid yourself that everyone's researching our digital presence beforehand. Everyone's looking at that. Now, what I think we've really done is probably let ourselves down on that because we constrained our bandwidth. We said, okay, let's hit this mark, let's bootstrap, let's do that. We probably should have found a way of enacting some of that a little bit sooner. I think we're probably constrained some of our growth that way and just haven't been able to articulate ourselves as well as possible. So that's the website, some of our social activity and things like that. We probably let that get a little bit worse than it should have been or underinvested in that.
Yeah, I hear you. It's when the money's coming through the door, it's hard to pay attention to some of the issues, right? Or you might not even see them.
Well, you get busy on the issues which come through, but again, you step back and I look at this and I go, well, maybe 20, 30% of that work, yes, we can win it and we can do it, but it's probably not where we should be focusing. And so the beauty if you're normally running marketing well is you're quite clear on where you're focusing. And so I think that's the problem is you get sales-led, you do chase that money, right? Because you're like, oh, we're trying to hit a number, we're trying to hit a number for the month or for the quarter, and it's a good deal. So you do the deal. And we've been pretty good. Like, everyone's on the same version of the product, there's no customization. Like, we're not in a bad shape from that. But we were still just doing work which was fundamentally harder and took longer than it probably should have without recognizing the opportunity cost, which is like in that same time, we might have closed 3 deals which were in our sweet spot more. And that's really hard to juggle. But that's certainly probably a mistake which we ended up making, just going a little bit too far down, in the interest of trying to show a revenue number, showing, picking up more of that type of work.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's even harder when when you have a sales role and you're in the weeds and it's just like, all you see is the hunt. All you see is like, I got to land that. And they're halfway through our process. And, and in
our world, they're really cool problems. So like, a really pragmatic example is we've done a little bit for some councils around speed and safety. So how are they changing like speed around schools, or when they're changing speed limits in cities, like how is it making safer or not? So you look at this stuff and you're like, this is awesome. I can have a real impact. Like, this is funny enough. It's as a driver, you first go through it and you're like, oh, this is really frustrating. But as you start to learn and talk to the industry, you just realize the difference that, a pedestrian being hit by a car at 50 versus 30 kilometers an hour, like one, you're most likely going to die. The other one, you're most likely going to survive and have minor impact, right? And so you start to learn this stuff and you're like, oh, wow, I can help. But there's an opportunity cost with all of that. And so that's the hard thing. Even if it's interesting work, you still got to think about what you're doing. And sometimes just try to keep narrow is my approach at this point. Like, try to solve one thing really, really well. And in time, we can do everything else. But we got to nail the core first. So
Got it. Now, Michelle, before we wrap up, and I have a few other questions, rapid fire questions I want to ask you. But before we wrap up, and there's been a lot of insights and a lot of great points that you've brought up. But if especially for if there are founders in the B2B space who are looking for that transition and that move, what would be an advice that you would have for them on this front?
2 things: you can't abdicate sales. So I often see founders, particularly technical founders, who think when they get to a scale, they can just kind of give sales off to someone else. And two, definitely think about investing in marketing early, but really understand what that investment looks like over time. That's not a tactical piece of activity to win quick work.
That's a really solid advice, both of them. What on the second one, was that a point of view that you had earlier on that, okay, we're going to invest some in marketing and that's going to get results? Was that something that you had yourself initially, or not really?
Yeah, no, it definitely was. So, a really good example for me is, so I worked for Air New Zealand for a number of years, and it's a really strong brand. And it's a funny one, right? Because a lot of people don't value brand. But when you work for, say, Air New Zealand, and I would see people consistently spending more money to fly with us when they had a choice to go somewhere else. And materially more money, which made a really big difference in profitability and other things to come with us. When I saw our staff, even years after years after leaving the company, still choosing Air New Zealand because they're so loyal to it, I was like, that's worth a lot, right? Like, we've got a common cause, we've got a common belief. And so I've always held to that. And so that's when I got really excited actually coming into the space, which we're doing now, is we're going, fundamentally, everyone we're working with from a customer set wants to make our cities better. We want to make them thrive. And we're struggling. They're in gridlock. We're trying to make them better, but it's just nasty and messy. So I'm like, there's this really cool marketing angle, right? Like, if I could give them a job and come back as a CMO, it'd be such an awesome challenge. Like, there's no one else who's here, green fields, you've got this really cool, purpose-driven reason for existing. And you've got an audience which is hungry, right? So there's a whole heap of challenge in that. But it's a fascinating space. And so, yeah, that's certainly a strong belief I've had from beforehand.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think, for me, the whole concept, and I in the literature, you read about the importance of brand, and once it was driven home for me when we did these through our agency. We did this ABM campaign for one client and then another client, and they were both in the same space. One had a much stronger brand than the other one. And the difference was just crazy. Like, when you did the campaign through the stronger brand, I think the number was like, the outcome was like we did the math on it, it was like 5.6 times better than the company. Same thing, right? Same thing. And there were some subtle differences, but not 5.6 times differences. The major thing was the brand. And it was fascinating, the difference between the two.
And it's such an interesting challenge for a business, right? Because the thing is that you can get under financial pressure and you get encouraged to reduce some of that brand spending, right? Or you're doing all this stuff and it seems to be less directly linked. And it's kind of the challenge with marketing is that it's got quite digital and analytical, which is kind of cool. Like, it's really changed how we can do marketing, which I love. But it also drives some really bad outcomes in how you're looking at solving the problem. And so some of the stuff that's hard, you do have to spend the money. Some of it's not going to work, some of it is. But it's kind of not the point, right? And so, like, that when I see it, it's so painful when I see people go, oh, we're not quite performing how we should be, but let's pull back. Where are you going to pull back? Oh, you pull back on the more strategic side and we'll just keep the tactical stuff out. And that if you let yourself go down that path, my God, you'd find yourself in a pretty awful place in 2 to 3 years' time.
Very true. Very true. Okay. All right. I got some rapid fire questions for us. Okay. That we're going to go through.
Let's go.
So the first one is, what is one resource? It could be a book, a blog, a podcast, whatever it is that has fundamentally changed the way you work and live.
I reckon probably at the moment it'd be Greylock podcast. And I've mentioned this actually just recently on a couple of things. Oh, no, actually reframe there. I'll go for economics. The podcast.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I love it. They tackle all sorts of different topics and all sorts of different issues. And they normally come up with a position which is a little bit different from what you think, or there'll be an aspect to it. So it doesn't relate to anything in particular, but it just teaches me to continuously look at a problem and really think about it.
Love it. Question number 2, if you could give one advice to someone in the B2B, what would it be? It could even be a founder.
B2B sales, marketing, just in general.
Let's say B2B founder, someone similar in your own position who's maybe a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I just say, look, we're all people. You're selling to people. It's a human-to-human game.
I love it. Question number 3, Who are some of the influencers you follow in the sales and marketing and business space?
Interesting one. I'll take a different take on this one maybe as well. So very much a fan of social psychology. So actually people like Malcolm Gladwell and thinking about how you think and influences and how influence occurs. There's some really fascinating pieces there. So again, almost dovetailing into that prior one. So we're dealing with humans, like how do we crack these things? Like how do we motivate people? That I found the most kind of inspirational. From a tactical level, I've been following and working with Scott Sambucci a little bit, who's a sales guy up in the US. Matt from Sassy Sales, I heard him speak a couple of times. I don't know him well, but love people who are just like cut through, open, honest. They may be right about some things, they may be wrong about others, but they've just got a clear opinion. So
love it. Okay, last question. What's something that excites you? I mean, you've now been in the whole B2B sales and marketing for a while. What excites you about B2B today?
I guess particularly from an Australian, New Zealand perspective, the impact we can have on the world. So we're really well positioned to actually take on some very, very large markets because we all recognise that our kind of home market or where we are is just too small, right? So we have to think global right from the start. And we're doing that in a really different way. But I think of what I've seen from B2B businesses in bigger markets, their markets are so massive that they don't have to try that hard. So the thing which I love and which really excites me is just the ecosystem which we're starting to build within Australia and New Zealand about really great ideas. People are really, really hungry. And almost from our starting point as the underdog, I think, if we can break through, we've got a really good chance of success.
Love it. Misha, this has been great. I love our conversation. I think there were some great points about the transition from word of mouth to a marketing-led growth methodology. I think you shared some awesome advice and even challenges that you've been going through. So I really appreciate your time and thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving us that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and sharing the pod with a friend. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please make sure to join the community Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack. growthcolony.org/Slack. Thanks again for all the support, and we're looking forward to seeing you again in the next one.